productive day yesterday, but we had some responsibilities, didn't we? We have the review questions for units 1 and 2, so let's jump right into it. Going on. There we go. Starting with unit 1 on page 13. Okay. So how this is going to work, I'm going to read out the question. You tell me what you got as your answer, and then we'll discuss if needed. Sometimes the answer itself is the explanation. But if it needs
Michael,
additional
sorry.
yes.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize. I wasn't here on day one. So just going forward, what's the best approach? Should I be printing out the unit one, unit two materials and having those ready? Or okay, what's the guidance here? Just so I know going forward what I need to do and what I need to have prepared.
And you were registered for the morning live streaming class, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So you just have to make up the first day of class.
No, absolutely. Yeah,
And
understood.
then moving forward, it really depends on your setup, right? If you have obviously you got the PDF version of the textbook that has been provided to you. It's in your account. If you log
Yep.
into your Cameron Academy account, you can easily print that out. If you like something tangible in front of you, some people prefer to use your device and highlight directly on the device using or highlight directly on the PDF using their device. So that is your personal preference. But we will be highlighting some content throughout each unit, and we expect you guys to highlight the same.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, of course, the first day of class, we had some homework at the end of the night, and we're going to review that homework. But since you were not here on the first day of class, you need to just follow along for now and
Hmm.
spend the time to go through this independently.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yep.
then when you make up the first day of class, it will make a little bit more sense.
Gotcha. Yep. No worries.
Alrighty. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. Just let me know. But go through the 5-step guide, the steps towards getting your real estate license. That's going to help you get back on track as to the most important components of what we discussed yesterday. Yesterday was introduction to the real estate business, and of course, the steps towards getting your license. So if you just kind of want to get back on track, at least for now, go through that 5-step guide. It's a PDF, and it will tell you the steps that you need to go through towards getting your license. You need to submit fingerprints electronically. You need to submit your application, and the links are there, and the steps are there as well. Sound good?
Yep. Thanks, man.
All right, awesome. Thanks for joining.
Mhm.
Question 1, which statement is true regarding the use of the term realtor?
B.
Correct answer is B as in Bravo. Good job. All realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. Remember this. A real estate licensee is not necessarily a realtor. You have to join this membership to call yourself a realtor. It's not free, it's not cheap. You cannot join independently. You have to be working for a broker that has this membership. We're missing some folks, aren't we? We're missing about 2 or 3. We're missing Francisco in the back. We're missing Dawson. And somebody else is missing as well. We'll figure it out. Number 2, the term follow-up refers to?
D.
Yeah, exactly, D. And what is follow-up good for in our business, for us as a real estate professional? What does it do for us?
Stays top of mind.
Yeah, long-lasting business relationships, of course, and then reputation. We know how important that is. That's an intangible asset that has value. And it also gives you those future referrals, right? Because if you're following up with them, you're showing that you care, and then you're also asking them, don't forget, you're in a sales position. Hey, by the way, do you have any other friends or relatives that are also interested in buying, selling, and so forth? Number 3, even though certain exceptions apply, an active real estate licensee is legally entitled to appraise real property for compensation concerning a non-federally related transaction. What'd you get? Longest answer would say, as long as she does not represent herself as a state certified or licensed appraiser and complies with the USPAP. Okay. Number 4, the field of property management has experienced rapid growth and specialization primarily because of the increase. Correct answer is C, is in Charlie. The increase in the number of absentee owners. The owner is absent. They don't want to take care of the property themselves. They're not living in it. They want to use it as an investment, and therefore they need property managers like us, which we can participate in under the supervision of a broker and provide that service, make money off of that arrangement. Number 5, real estate licensees must comply with the USPAP when conducting which value estimates? Easy
A.
enough, it's A. Appraisals, you got it. CMAs and BPOs do not have to comply with the USPAP. Appraisers are paid a fee because A, to accept compensation based on the appraised value is, of course, a conflict of interest and a violation of the USPAP. Number 7, the 5 major sales specialties do not include B, special loose. That's an easy one. The 5 areas of real estate are residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, businesses. Number 8, an owner of a Florida property has decided to hire someone to handle the property's leasing, managing, marketing, and maintenance. This arrangement is called what?
B.
The service is property management. That's an easy one. Good for 1 point. 9, which type of construction involves building to a buyer's specifications? Yes. I'm glad you didn't think that spec was short for specifications. No, it's short for speculative. 14, page 14. 10, question 10. The term dedication as it applies to development and construction refers to? Yeah, of course. Longest answer. What's the most common example of a dedication, gift of land to the local government so they can use it for a public purpose? The roads are the most common example. Yes, parks are examples as well. The sidewalks, of course, but the most common are the streets because the developer, they want to construct the houses, sell the houses, move on to the next project. They don't want to maintain the streets. Sometimes they don't even develop sidewalks, right? Number 11, what type of license is required to sell or lease business opportunities for another person? Correct answer is C. Yeah,
That's what it
a
is.
real estate license. There's no such thing as a business broker license or a business opportunity broker license. All you need is a real estate license to specialize in helping people buy, sell, lease their business. It's not a separate certification that's required or a license. 12, selecting a limited geographical area in which a real estate professional develops special expertise is farming or having a farm area. Check on something real quick. Okay, all right, we're good. And having a farm area, specializing, creating that niche for ourselves is going to eliminate what around us? Competition. And we have to find clever ways to eliminate competition. There's a lot of real estate professionals in the state of Florida, as are there in most states. However, you have to figure out how you're going to separate yourself from the pack. This is one way to do it. Specialize. That is a blast from the past right there. That flip phone. Gotta love it. 13, managing which type of property of more than 10 units requires a CAM license? D, condo complex. They make these things called dumb phones now. Like you have a smartphone and then you have like a dumb phone, which has no apps on it besides like messaging, and that's about it. So that way, you know, you're not tempted to be stuck to your phone all day. I thought it was pretty interesting. 14, effective advertising involving developing a database of prospects to direct a specific message is
C.
target marketing. C is in Charlie, easy enough. 15, a broker charges a prospective seller $50 for a CMA. Which statement applies?
B.
B.
It's B. This is permissible provided the broker does not represent the CMA as an appraisal. Any questions here? How'd you guys feel? Question, unit, exam 1? This is pretty simple. It's like an introductory unit. Very few questions on your state exam come from this unit. And by the way, if you're curious as to what percentage of questions will you see from each unit, all 19 in your textbook, as it reflects on the state exam, we gave you something called a candidate handbook, and that has been provided to you. It's in your dashboard. I don't know if you've noticed that. and then you could download it, you could review it, and it tells you the percentage out of each unit. I can tell you the most important units in the textbook. It's by sheer percentage of questions that come out of it. However, this one's very little. And as you can imagine why. Let's move on to Unit 2 questions. It's freezing in here, isn't it? Just keep this a little bit open, maybe.
Freezing in Florida?
What was that?
Freezing in Florida? It's like
Oh my
-2 up
gosh, look
here.
at this wonderful gentleman we have here, Dawson. Thank you. And bringing a TV. And hopefully I don't break this one.
Swear. I try.
I will not break it. I will be gentle as a lamb, okay? So we will hook that up in just a moment, but we're going through the review questions for Unit 2 now, which is page, help me out, 41? Yes, and Abby, I know you're in Pennsylvania, you're like, freezing in Florida? Yeah, like,
I know.
yeah. Drowning in your tears over there. But yes, this is called, listen, my blood is thin. I lived here too long, but it's okay. I could deal with it. Throw on a jacket, throw on a sweater, you'll be good. I can only imagine what you guys are dealing with. I think I have a relative that lives in New York, and she mentioned it's 9 degrees in New York or something like that. Like yesterday,
Yeah.
she sent a text, it was like 9 degrees. So I don't know what it is in
We're about
Pennsylvania.
there. Yep.
Are
we're
you in
about that.
Philly or where were you at?
Yeah, I'm in Philly. But Bob here is too. He's in the office. So
You said Bob?
Haralabus, yeah, he goes by Bob.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So are you okay with that if I call you Bob? Is that an inside joke? I'm not gonna call you Bob. All right, I got
No,
you.
it's his name.
All right. Anyhow, we're on question number 1. Licensed sales associate may operate.
I said
Would you
A.
guys get
Back up here.
the most accurate
Oh.
answer is B is in Bravo, longest answer. For the broker registered as the sales associate's employer. And be careful, because this includes some terminology that we discussed at the end of the unit, registration. We know what registration means in our business. It means the process of submitting information to the beeper. We have to be accurate with that. Pay attention to those terms. Number 2, a sales associate applicant is not required to comply with which requirement? It's C, because we don't have to be a resident. We know what a resident is defined as for license purposes. Somebody who's lived here for at least, or somebody who plans to live here for at least 4 months within a year. Number 3, which person does not meet the experience requirement or requirements to obtain a Florida broker's license?
D.
Yeah, it is D. An applicant who has held a Florida sales associate license during 2 of the preceding 5 years while employed by an owner developer. Now, I didn't really mention this yesterday, but I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm glad you caught it. The correct answer is D, so you are accurate. But in order to become a broker, you must be active with a broker, not an owner developer, which we know is another option for us to hang our license with, like a major home builder, timeshare resort, and so forth. But you can't earn the experience to become a broker yourself unless you're with a broker. Is the rule. The time period is accurate, right? To throw you off, 2 years within 5 years is correct. But then the owner developer throws it off. For what information appears on the face of the license? Good for 1 point. C as in Charlie. Number 5, an associate applicant is not required to disclose which information on the license application. Do you have to be a citizen? No. Correct answer is B. But you must have a what number? Social. For what reason? For child support obligations. What other reason do you need a social? At least that's what the book says. But we know the truth. Taxes to make sure you're legal to work in this country. Come on. Things are changing rapidly in this country, and it's very interesting. If anybody kind of chimed in and saw all the changes and the executive orders that went through. It's going to be very interesting in the upcoming months and how that affects everything that's going on, especially with like Internal Revenue Service, Kash Patel, and everything that's going on with the CIA and FBI, and very interesting if he gets confirmed. All right, number 6. A real estate licensee works on a commission basis for 2 separate brokerage companies. Which statement is true?
A.
Yeah, of course. Can you be active with 2 at the same time? No. You can only have your license active with 1 employer, of course. 7. What is the Latin term for a plea of nolo? Okay. I give away the answer is D as in Delta, nolo contendere. Not YOLO, but NOLO. 8. John is in. What did you guys get for number 8?
It's gonna confuse me. I did B. Yeah.
It's C as in Charlie. Completing a license by endorsement application and everything that follows along with that. That's for military specifically. 9. Which event may cause a FREC to refuse to certify an individual as qualified for licensure?
Okay.
Yeah, B. Was convicted. Keyword, a fraud, which is a huge red flag for money in an insurance scam. But you'll see how that differs from the last question. 10, an applicant has held a real estate license in good standing in another state since 2019. The applicant is licensed in a state that has mutual recognition with Florida. 5 months ago, they moved to Orlando. Can they get a license in Florida through mutual recognition? No, because A, they're considered to be a resident. They moved to Orlando, Florida. How many months ago? 5. Is that more than 4? Are they considered to be a resident, and therefore must do everything residents have to complete in order to get the license, just like what you're going through right now. 11. A woman received her Florida Sales Associate license last year. Which requirement must she complete to become a licensed real estate broker? It's A. Have to have at least completed the first renewal, which we know is the post license for sales associate. 12. A man has a North Carolina broker's license. He's not licensed in Florida. He sells a parcel of land he owns in Florida. Assuming all else is proper, this is a legal transaction because it's B, of course. Do you need a real estate license to sell your own? No. For sale by owner. You got it? We call them FSBO. FSBO sellers. FSBO. FSBO. 13. A sales associate applicant who has submitted a correctly completed application for the state license examination and who successfully passes the state exam may legally begin to operate as a licensee when the? Yeah, I would say so. It's D as in Delta, longest answer. Your status is active with the beeper. You can find that on their website, myfloridalicense.com, same place where you register, submit your application for licensure. The link should be live for fingerprints, so you can go ahead and schedule your fingerprints, pay and schedule. 14, if the post-licensing requirement is not fulfilled before the first renewal and the sales associate licensee wishes to continue in the real estate business, the licensee, B, must requalify, shortest answer. Because the first renewal is the most important. If you do not complete the post-licensing requirement, you lose your license, it becomes null and void, and you have to start all over again. That's why I mentioned, and hopefully you take my advice, and Linda mentioned this to you last night. As soon as you pass the state exam, what do you need to do? So your post-license class, your first renewal, knock out the education at least, and then when they ask for the renewal payment, just pay it. You don't have to think about that. I mean, you could do that with a credit card. And mainly you just do it through their website on your account. Services of real estate do not include? Of course, it's C. Selling cemetery lots does not require a real estate license. 16. Which statement best describes who must be licensed to practice real estate in Florida? It's D. Longest answer. Unless specifically exempted by law, that was the addition to that. And what are the services of real estate? Do you remember the acronym to help you recall? A, bar sale, advertising, buying, appraising, renting, selling, auctioning, leasing, and exchanging. You need a real estate license to provide those services for compensation. All right, 17. Which individual is not exempt from licensure under Florida Statute 475? This is one of those double negative questions. The double negative. Who's not exempt? First of all, if you're exempt from licensure, what does that mean? Exempt from licensure. Are you required or not required to have a license if you're exempt? You're not required, but that's not what it says. It says who's not exempt. So that means who's required to have a license. Why don't they just say that? Which individual is required to have a license under Florida Statute 475? It's confusing. I get it. And that's why I recommend, and hopefully this resonated with you, schedule to take your exam in Spanish, okay? Why? Because there's no translation for not exempt in Spanish. Anybody speak Spanish in here? Okay, good. Good response. So here's the thing. Is there any translation for not exempt that makes sense? That's a natural way of speaking in Spanish. It doesn't make any sense. And you're gonna have a lot of backlash. So they eliminate that in the Spanish version of the test. But you can click the button, translate the entire exam into English, schedule in Spanish, take it in English. You're welcome. So who needs a license? D. Because yeah, they're active with the owner developer, which you could be salaried, but they receive a bonus based on their sales performance. Remember, anything of value off the real estate transaction. Of course, yeah. Anything that's paid on a transactional basis. That's performance-based bonus. You need a real estate license to receive any form of compensation off the real estate transaction. If it's salary, it's just a salary. Doesn't matter how much you sell, more or less, doesn't matter. You get paid the salary. Salary doesn't change. But anything off the transaction, you need a license for that. That's the rule. 18. So it's an incentive to get a license. And it's an incentive to kind of answer your question, like why? Right? Why is it required? Like, why do you need a license to receive commission? It's an incentive for you to get licensed and regulated to make sure you're following the rules, especially if you can make a drastic amount off of a real estate transaction. I mean, just do some crazy numbers. You sell a $2 million property and you make 3% on it. Real estate agents are doing this all the time. So just think about that. You want them to be regulated, right? A salaried individual manages a condo building and rents units for 3 month to 6 month periods. The manager what?
T.
Is exempt. You'll notice a trend as you go through these questions on not just your homework, but your exams. One of them is shortest and longest answer. I've been mentioning that subtly to you. Shortest answer, longest answer. You'll notice the majority of the correct answers on your exam are either the shortest, the most direct, or the longest or more detailed. If you're stuck between two answers, you're like thinking, okay, I can flip a coin and I'll just choose from that, or eeny, meeny, miny, don't use that. And some people use a strategy, when you don't know what it is, always select C. Don't use that strategy, okay? There are better strategies than that, and I'm gonna provide them to you, including if you're stuck between two answers, you're thinking it's 50-50, go for the more detailed answer. They're usually including additional details for a reason. 3 answers start off similar or look similar to one another. 1 answer sticks out or is different from the rest. In front of us, the answer that's sticking out is saying, hey, look at me, right? It's getting your attention. Or where you see 3 answers are dollar amounts, and then 1 answer is written out in words. The answer that's usually sticking out is the one you're looking for. Another one is all of the above. I know it's silly, but more than 70% of the time, if you have all of the above as one of your options, it's the correct answer. That's a teacher's test-taking strategy. Anyhow, there's a few more I have up my sleeve. I'll provide them to you. I'll show you how to beat test anxiety and all that stuff. We'll usually talk about that at the end of the course, so that way it's fresh in your mind going into your exams. 19, gosh, it's freezing in here. Let me, hold on a second. I don't really think there's a way to regulate the temperature specifically in here. I'm going to ask about it at the front. Yeah, we're probably going to move to another location for the next Winter Park class, just in case you're referring anybody. We're going to be, they're going to host us over at the movie theater right here and next door, next to the Publix. This is a cool setup. So I can project it on a huge screen, and it actually has office desks and chairs. So it's really cool. And, and they're going to have concessions as well. So concessions, like popcorn and snacks and all that stuff.
That's actually a genius idea. That's a genius idea.
And then that will incentivize me to like inject like maybe some cool videos and stuff like that, make it a little bit more interactive. But we'll see how that goes. It's a new partnership. All right, 19, the developer purchased a tract of land, subdivided the property into individual lots. The developer hired his son, who's not licensed to sell the lots. A little nepotism there. The father agreed to pay his son a salary of $200 per week. Wow, thanks, Dad. After 2 weeks, the son had only sold 2 lots. So the father decided to add an incentive. Uh-oh. The father promised his son after every 5th lot was sold, he would give his son a lot free and clear. That's one hell of an incentive. Wish I had a daddy like that. Sounds like a different type of daddy, yeah. After 1 more week, the son had only sold 1 more lot. The son is just not good at sales, obviously. So the son quit his job to work for another developer who paid a higher weekly salary based on this information. What's true? They're both in violation. Keyword, incentive, not licensed. Do you see it? Not licensed, received an incentive. 20, FBI files reveal that 6 months. First of all, if FBI knows about somebody, was it a small crime? Probably not. And we continue reading. It says, charged with arson in an large insurance claim. What's arson? Burning, caught by FBI for burning property in a large insurance claim. So burning property for what? Money. If somebody was caught burning property for money, should they be working in the housing industry, buying and selling properties and so forth? Probably not. Huge red flag, but it's not up to us to decide whether or not they're qualified. They're required to disclose the information presented on the application. And who gets to decide? Well, it says FREC. What's the correct answer? A, we'll use the discretion to determine if they're qualified or not. And they're probably going to ask them to come in for an interview because I'm sure they're going to be curious. What do you have to say for yourself? Arson in Georgia as a broker. What's going on here? Anyhow, let's take a quick break. And I want you guys to be back at 9:45. Stretch out, grab a snack, make a phone call, do what you got to do, be ready to rock and roll. See you guys in just a moment. Good to go. Now, we're actually going to get started with Unit 4 and work our way back to Unit 3. Let me share my screen. That would help. Go. I don't want to do that. Cool. All right. Makes things a little bit easier when you can see the textbook, but let's get started with our session for today. Unit 4 is all about the relationships that exist in our business. We're going to discuss various relationships, buyers, sellers, dealing with the relationship in a brokerage company between us as an associate and our employing broker. And we're going to begin on page 66. To set the tone for this unit, we see our first subject, law of agency. Let's begin here. Let me read this out to you on line 2. It's going to help us understand a little bit better. When a person, the action of a person in our business, delegating authority to somebody else, this act creates a what type of relationship? A what type of relationship is created? Agency relationship. Agency relationships fall within the body of law called the law of agency. And there are 3 types of law that we should be familiar with. Let's go through each one of these. The first one starts with the letter C. It's what? It's common law. I'm going to simplify this for you if you could write this down. Essentially what this means, what is common law? It's write that down. It's common sense law. It's really just the difference between right and what? Wrong. Ethical versus unethical. You got it. But then we come across statutory law. Anytime you see statutory law from this point on, we're talking about what type of law? State law. And then anytime we see administrative law, it's referring to what type of law? License law. So from this point on, you see administrative, think of license. Administrative penalties, administrative matters, administrative law, it just means license. Okay, we'll come back to that. If you continue on to line 23, highlight this paragraph. Starting on line 23. Just a moment ago, we said when a person delegates authority to another in our business to act on his or her behalf, agency relationship has been created. So that's what it's referred to as. But the actual person that's delegating the authority has a name. They're called what? Principal. Remember this. And the person who's assuming the responsibility is called the what? Agent. So the first relationship we encounter in our business is a relationship that exists between a principal and a what? Person delegating authority, agent assuming that responsibility. And between these two individuals exists a what type of relationship? Starts with the letter F. It's on line 33. Fiduciary relationship. What does fiduciary mean? It's an odd term. I can recognize that fiduciary means individuals that are dealing in what with one another. Look on line 34. Trust and confidence. I like the term they use on line 35 just a little bit more. Starts with the letter A. Allegiance, alliance. Think about countries that have alliances with one another. Are they looking out for each other's best interests? Yeah, of course. And that's what exists between a principal and an agent. But what if I were to ask you about the relationship that exists between a seller and a buyer in a typical real estate transaction? Do you think sellers and buyers are dealing fiduciarily? Are they dealing in trust and confidence with one another? Yes or no? Sellers and buyers. The answer is absolutely not. There's no way, right? Exactly. they have adverse opposite interests, right? The seller wants to get what? Most money possible. Buyer wants to get the best price they can for the property. So we describe buyers and sellers dealing at what with one another? Arm's length. That means stay at least an arm's length away because I don't trust you. This is also known as, it's a Latin phrase, it's on the next page, it's in bold. Highlight this. Caveat emptor. I saw that on my state exam. It means let the buyer beware. Makes sense. As a buyer, be aware because you can't trust the seller. You don't have the same goal. Going back to principals and agents, fiduciary that exists between these two individuals. There are two types of agents that exist. You have to be familiar with them. And depending on how much authority is given to you by the principal will determine what type of agent you are. The first one is called what? General. Anytime you see the word general, think of the word some, like a general store has some of everything. Dollar General. And in this case, if you're a general agent on behalf of a principal, you're delegated some what? Duties while acting in the best interests of that principal. Fiduciary, everything that comes along with that. So you might be curious, what's an example of this? There's two examples we see here in front of us. Property managers, for instance. We learned about property management yesterday, right? So who is the principal? The owner or the brokerage providing the service? Who's delegating the authority? It's the owner. And the brokerage is acting in the best interest of the owner, fiduciary with them. And they're delegated some responsibility, right? Some duties. Not all, not one, but some. Maintain the property, manage tenants. We know it goes into property management. Not handling lawsuits, not paying property taxes, renewing their insurance for them, but some. Another example, which you're tested on, well, actually, no, ignore this. Ignore these highlights because we're going to update this as a new version of the textbook. But for now, it's important to know this second example. The relationship that exists between a broker and all of their associates that they hire to work for that brokerage company. That's another example of principal agent dynamic, but all of the associates are what type of agents? General, because they're delegated some responsibilities, duties, yes, on behalf of the principal while maintaining fiduciary with them. But then we come across a what type of agent? Yeah, special agent. Anytime you see the word special, write this down. It means specific or one specific duty while acting in the best interest of the principal, maintaining fiduciary with him. One example of this could be when you list a seller's property. And you'll see that here in front of us. When you list a seller's property, this could be an example. What is going on? Oh, that's why. You could be delegated that responsibility, and that's one specific duty. List that one property, find a buyer for this property. We'll talk about the variations of that later on. Let's move on. This is what I really wanted to get to in this unit, and this is the most important part of this unit on page 68. You'll see on lines 11 through 13, brokerage relationships that exist in Florida, the options you have: no brokerage, single agent, transaction broker. Is that reflected in your textbook? Okay. We're going to go through each one of these three. Understanding these three is what you're going to be tested on for this unit. That's what makes up the majority of the questions from Unit 4, understanding those three relationships. Page 69. This is what I wanted to get to. Figure 4.1 breaks it down for us. Not only those three relationships that we just highlighted, you'll see those on the right, but the duties that you're obligated to depending on which relationship you select to work with that buyer-seller with. Let's go through each one of these And I want you to take down some notes for each one of them so we can better understand. The first sounds odd. It's called the what brokerage relationship? You see on the right, the three relationships, no brokerage. Is that in front of you or is it different? Okay, this is the same.
Brokerage transaction.
No brokerage relationship. That sounds weird, right? You're hiring me to be your no broker. What does that even mean? The takeaways from what this relationship is all about. There's no representation that exists in this relationship. God bless you. You're not brokering. You're not negotiating. So there's no representation. You're not negotiating. So when would such an arrangement exist? When would you be hired not to negotiate, not to represent? Mainly when you're dealing with the FSBO. We call them FSBO sellers. I just mentioned what FSBO, for sale by owner. Okay, when you're dealing with a for sale by owner, the name itself gives away the fact that they don't want you to represent them. It's for sale by the owner. I got it. I don't need your help. But almost all the time, they get in a situation where they find a buyer, negotiate a price, both parties agree, but they don't know what to do next. So they hire you to come in to take care of the rest of the transaction. Essentially, take care of the what? The paperwork. It's the paperwork relationship. Write that down. You're taking care of the contracts used to solidify the deal. And that's what you're limited to. Nothing beyond that. Does that make sense? You understand when this relationship would exist and be appropriate? It's not a common thing, I can tell you, but it does happen. And you're probably wondering, do I have to charge them like a flat fee for that? Or like what's the compensation structure? It's negotiable. Everything in real estate is negotiable. Yeah. If you say, hey, listen, I'm going to charge you 1% for just taking care of the contracts, that's up to you. That's percentage-based commission. Or you could say, I'm going to charge you $1,000 flat fee to take care of the contracts for you. And then that's all I'm going to do. That's it. That's how simple it can be. Now, if you choose this relationship, there are 3 duties that you owe that individual, that client, when dealing with them. Think of the acronym ADD, will help you remember. Number 1, accounting for all funds. This is keeping track of the money. What's the only money, I'm just asking you, that you could possibly see and be responsible for throughout the duration of the transaction before you receive your commission? Yeah, the deposit. They call it by a few other names, good faith, escrow, binder, deposit. When the buyer is serious and make an offer, if the offer is accepted, under the terms of the contract, they have to give a deposit, a placeholder, until the day of the closing, right? And they come up with the remaining balance. So that money could be given to you. How do you handle this money? We'll talk about that in Unit 5, procedures. Procedures are not what we have in front of us. It's just account for those funds, keep track of the money. Next is deal honestly and, yeah, it goes without saying. I don't need to elaborate on that. And the next one is important, disclose all known material, physical defects that the buyer cannot see for themselves. As a real estate professional, if you have knowledge of a physical problem with the property, you have to disclose it and you fulfill your obligation. That's it. That's how simple it can be. I want you to write this down though. You're disclosing material, that means physical, latent, that's how they describe it in your exam, which means hidden defects. And we'll unpack this so you can better understand some examples. There's a hole in the wall. The buyer walks past it, doesn't say anything unless you reveal that to them. Hey, by the way, there's a hole in the wall. Is that a physical problem with the property? But do you have to disclose it? The answer is no. Because I said latent defects have to be disclosed, which means hidden.
So you got rusty pipes, can't see that.
Now let's change the circumstance. Let's say the hole in the wall is covered by a painting and you know the hole exists behind the painting. Now must you disclose? To the prospective buyer, yes. Because it's what? It's hidden. Bingo. Doesn't matter how small, you'll see an example of this for your homework tonight. But there are certain things that are questionable. What about illegal activity associated with the property? The previous owner was a drug dealer. It used to be a trap house, crack house, something like this. Would that have to be disclosed to the prospective buyer? Interesting enough, federal law says it does not have to be disclosed. So you'll find out soon enough once you own the property. You'll get knocked at your front door at 1 a.m. Hey, you got this stuff? But the real estate agent does not have to disclose. Federal law says it's not relevant to the real estate transaction.
Is that a state-by-state basis then?
Federal. National.
So it's forced, like it doesn't matter. State.
Abby can tell you. Federal law. She knows. in
We don't have to
Pennsylvania,
do that,
close.
yeah.
Any type of legal activity associated with the property. What about death? Any type of death? Imagine somebody goes into the room and say, it's just a stain on the ground, and I smell it. Is somebody dying here? Must you disclose at that point? I'm not telling you to lie, okay? Deal honestly and fairly. But federal law says you don't have to disclose. So could you be the agent that says, I suggest you do your own research? Yeah, you can. You can be that agent. It's up to you. I'll leave that in your hands. I see dead people. Superstition. I mean, like, does that affect your decision as to whether or not you're going to buy it if somebody died in the property?
Not me.
I don't care. If I can get a better deal, bring on the ghosts. I don't care. But my wife, on the other hand, she's like, I'm not stepping foot in that house. Let's move on. You'll notice something interesting. Those three duties are consistent on all three. That's one way you might be tested. What duty is consistent on all three relationships? Something like that. Anyhow, but let's move on to the next relationship, which is more prevalent in our business, at least here in Florida. It's called the what? Next relationship. Starts with a T. Transaction broker. Transaction brokers, there is representation that exists. You are representing. But something interesting about this. You're not limited to one side. You can represent both sides. It's not a dual agency. If you're thinking about that, if you're up north, they call it dual agency. Sometimes it's illegal, sometimes it's acceptable. It depends on the state. But you can represent both sides, and you can do it ethically as a transaction broker. I'll explain why. But if you're representing both sides, and you know buyers and sellers are dealing at what with one another? Arm's length, caveat emptor, right? How do you ethically represent both sides if they're looking for opposite things in a real estate transaction, especially in negotiation?
Well, how does disclosure come into it? You find something out on one party. You don't have loyalty to both sides, so how does that work then?
You don't. There's no loyalty that exists in this relationship. You're, as a transaction broker, you are what? What did I write down? You're neutral. You're impartial. It's limited representation for both sides. So how do you remain neutral, limited in negotiation? That's always a question. It's one of the duties. And it's the second duty, the additional duty we're adding, because we already have three, right? We already went through the first three. Present all offers, counter offers. That's it. You present offers and information to each side until they can reach a what? An agreement. While remaining what? Neutral. You're a middleman. You're transacting between both parties. So what that means is to remain neutral. If you receive information from one party that could jeopardize their leverage in the transaction and negotiation, like the seller tells you, I'm desperate, I need to sell the property by this date. Are you going to present that to the buyer and say, hey, we can lowball them? Of course not. That's not something that you can present. You have to remain what? Neutral. So you can do it. I mean, use skill, care, and diligence. That's self-explanatory. I just mentioned presenting all offers. Remain neutral, limited confidentiality. Don't present information to the other side that can hurt the other party. And perform any additional duties that are mutually agreed upon. Those are the four additional on top of the three we already mentioned. And then we come across the what type of relationship? Single is just like it sounds. As a single agent, you're going to choose your side. There is representation that exists in this relationship, but with only what I write down, one side. Buyer or seller, not both. And whatever side you choose, you are loyal to that one side, obedient to that one side. Do you see? The acronym COLD will help you remember this specific special duties for this relationship. Complete confidentiality replaces limited. That's why it doesn't exist here. Obedience, loyalty, and anything you know that's going to benefit them within the transaction you present it to that party that you have this single agent relationship. You're probably wondering when most likely would I choose this relationship, because it sounds like transaction broker is the most attractive. Why wouldn't I want to represent both sides and make a commish potentially off of both sides of the transaction? Does that click a little bit better? As a single agent, you're only stuck with that one side. You can't represent the other side. You can understand why the transaction broker relationship is most attractive and most often used. I'm not telling you that you choose the transaction broker relationship when you have a seller and a buyer sitting in front of you at the same time, telling you that they both want you to represent them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you can start by listing a seller's property as a transaction broker. And if you just so happen to come across a buyer that would be interested in that property, you can represent them as well, while remaining what? And bring them together and make a commish off of both sides. The rules have changed with commission and national lawsuit and NAR and everything that we'll talk about in a moment. But yes, question.
Yeah, so for transaction, is it more risky to do that sort of transaction, or do you find that it's more than?
No, it's the most common used. I'll use it for every single deal that I come across. I've only had less than a handful of circumstances where somebody insisted to use a single agent relationship because of some blog they read online, some website, or some video that they watched on YouTube. And I felt it was my obligation to convince them to choose a transaction broker because of what it means to me and my brokerage and the opportunities that it creates for me. Otherwise, I feel like I'm limited. You just got to help them realize. Now, I'm not saying that you do this in an unethical way. There's nothing wrong with choosing one versus another, but I can help them realize why one might be more beneficial than the other. You're going to be in that position as well. So if somebody chooses the single agent relationship, and I'm thinking, man, I can market this, I could probably find a buyer for them, and I can make a commission off the buyer as well if I find a buyer. But if I choose single agent, I'm stuck with one side. I can't represent the other side. So this is how I would present it. Hey, we can choose a single agent relationship, but if I find a buyer that wants to offer full asking price for your property, I can't represent them. Is that something that you want? No. Of course, you're my person. I want you to help me with that. Why wouldn't I? Okay, well, I'm limited. I can't do that if we choose a single agent relationship. I can only represent you. And then they'll change their tune. If they're still insisting, there's a couple other ways to convince them otherwise. You can tell them, hey, listen, if we choose a single agent relationship, fiduciary works both ways. This is where you're whipping out the big guns. I have fiduciary with you, and you have fiduciary with me. This is the only relationship where fiduciary exists because of loyalty, obedience. That's what fiduciary is, right? If I do something that causes loss or harm, legal action, you're going to take responsibility for my actions because we have this relationship with one another. Is that something you want? No. You're the real estate professional. Why would I take responsibility for your actions? Okay, well, that's what exists in the single agent relationship. So let's go ahead and choose transaction broker, and then here's why. Or if you want to make things awkward, ask them to explain why the single agent relationship is better than transaction broker, and just wait till it gets awkward. And then they'll not have enough ammunition to fight for it because they just learned about it or whatever the case may be. But you have the knowledge and you can convince them otherwise. I'll leave that in your hands. I would say The most common circumstance where you would choose a single agent relationship is when you're working with a relative or your best friend. Because of that relationship that exists, I think it would be unethical otherwise. Imagine if you're representing one of your family members listing their property. Yeah, and then you have a transaction broker. You're also representing the buyer. Who are you really going to look out for in the transaction? That's where my mind goes with that. You could do it neutrally if you're completely, spotless, but I mean, people are tempted, so I don't like it. If I'm representing my mother and listing her property, I'm going to have the single agent relationship with her because I know I'm going to look out for her best interests. Does that make sense? So you got to make that ethical choice. A lot of your exam is about ethics. And it's just common sense. Any questions about this? I'm going to test you. Not that you have to put this question number, but let's focus on this shaded box real quick. Fiduciary, non-fiduciary relationships. There's only one relationship out of the three where fiduciary exists. And what relationship is that? Single agency. You see yes next to it. And if that's the case, the person that you're representing is called a what? You remember? Fiduciary, principal agent relationship exists in a fiduciary. Okay. But the other two, transaction broker, no brokerage, fiduciary does not exist. And therefore, you're working with a customer. That's the correct terminology. Why is this important? Well, if you were taking your exam and they use the name principal, you know they're only talking about one relationship. They can only be talking about one, which is the single agent relationship. So that will help you get the correct answer, process of elimination. Okay. Let's talk about what we see on line 11 before I test you guys on what we just learned. You'll see on line 11, it says a dual what? Okay. Have you ever seen a spy movie before? You know what a double agent is in a spy movie? They're playing what? They're playing both sides to benefit themselves or a third party, some mystery person that's revealed usually at the end. It's the same thing in real estate. Being a dual agent is like a double agent in a spy movie. You're playing both sides within a real estate transaction. Essentially what it means is you're trying to have fiduciary with both sides of the transaction, which is alliance. Does that make sense? Having alliance with the buyer, alliance with the seller. How can you look out for both sides' best interests? What's the only relationship where fiduciary exists? Single agency. So essentially, it's where you try to have a single agent relationship with both buyer and seller in the same transaction. Illegal. Cannot do it. Florida prohibits this. Then you're probably confused. You're thinking, okay, well, what about the transaction broker relationship? You said transaction broker, isn't that a dual agency? No, because fiduciary does not exist in transaction broker. No alliance in transaction broker. That's why it's acceptable. You understand the alliance part, the fiduciary part? For instance, you have a single agent relationship with the seller, single agent relationship with the buyer as a real estate professional within your brokerage company. That's an illegal dual agency, but let me change it up. You have a single agent relationship with the seller. Your coworker has a single agent relationship with the buyer. Is that acceptable? I'm asking you a question. What do you think?
Yes.
The answer is absolutely no. It's still an illegal dual agency because something I want to reveal to you. Don't feel bad if I'm going to reveal something to you. The relationship agreement that you have with the buyer and or seller is not with you. It's with your what? It's with the brokerage company.
Okay.
It's never, you're never representing, it's the brokerage company. You're doing the work and you have a compensation split but with you and the broker, but the relationship is with the brokerage company, not with you. So if it's you and your coworker, it's still an illegal dual agency, single on both sides.
Both represent the same.
Yes. What if you have a single agent relationship with the buyer and with ABC Realty, and then the seller has a single agent relationship with XYZ Realty? Two different brokerage companies, there's no conflict. Okay, that's acceptable. But why would you want to outsource your commission to another brokerage company just to get the deal done? So that's why I mentioned what relationship is most appropriate. Transaction broker, why wouldn't you select that from the very beginning? But the question I get is, Michael, if you start with the single agent relationship, and you're stuck with one side, can you switch to transaction broker so you can represent both sides? The answer is yes, but you have to get a document signed by both parties for you to accomplish that.
Disclosure.
It is a disclosure
So-
to switch.
Michael, I have a question because this is really different from Pennsylvania.
Yes, I'm trying to. Do you think there's a volume thing on here?
Oh, can you
Hold on a second. I'm going to turn you up real quick.
hear me okay? Just checking, voice check.
Hold on a second. What do I do?
Just tap the button until you hit volume or something.
Just give me a second.
Pick up the volume.
Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to try to let me just go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to try
Is
to
there
hear you
any-
out.
Okay, so most listings, I guess from the listing side, like in your brokerage, if they choose single agency, anyone else within your brokerage cannot represent the buy side, then is that my understanding?
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Yep, that's correct. Because you already have a single agent relationship, loyalty to one side.
So is it common practice to, like, if you're sitting in open house, you have buyers come in, they're not represented, you just refer them out? Like, do you have like
No, I
another,
wouldn't. That's why I would never choose a single agent relationship.
right? Well, in the event you do, I guess I'm trying to
In the
understand like
event,
what's
in the
super
rare
common,
occasion,
right?
yes.
Okay.
In the rare occasion, yes. Or you don't have to. You don't have to refer out. There is a circumstance where you can help out the other side, and you can ethically do it if you already have single with the other side. I'm going to explain
Okay.
that in just a moment,
Okay.
but just give me a second.
Yeah.
Question. Yes. No. So the relationship, which is what we're describing, those three relationships, are usually determined by the brokerage company. They'll tell you which one you should use and which one is most. You can always lean on them and say, hey, listen, what do you think I should do in this situation? Should I use a transaction broker relationship, single? And they'll provide guidance. But once again, the relationship is not with you, it's with the brokerage company. You're doing the work though. So as a sales associate, you're active with the broker. The relationship with the buyer and or seller is with the broker, but you are facilitating, you're working in it. So you don't have to become a broker to accomplish that. You understand? Yeah, so but the relationship, once again, is not with you, the sales associate, it's with the brokerage company. Now, even though
Question.
there's three relationships, and you can choose any one of the three, you can. Under Florida law, it's presumed all licensees operate as what? As a transaction broker. This is at the bottom of page 73, line 18. So it's presumed in the state of Florida, unless you state otherwise, you are automatically a transaction broker.
So is that what most agents are doing? So if you work at a bigger office, let's say, and there's 100 agents in that office, obviously some deals or a good amount of deals may be brokered between the agents in the same brokerage. Are they just listing themselves as a transaction broker on the agreement of sale, and that's status
Yes.
quo? That's how it's done.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
It just makes sense. But you come across circumstances where one relationship might be more appropriate than the other. We'll talk about it. We'll get there. I want you to go to page 75. And this is what I mentioned to you, but here it is, okay? If you start off as a single agent with a buyer or a seller, whatever side you selected, and you want to switch, can you do it? Yes. But only one, you have to get a document signed. It has to be signed. You can't switch verbally. You'll see right here, to gain. You see this at the end of line 18? So we're on page 75 at the bottom. End of line 18. To switch the relationship from single to transaction broker, you only have to get one document signed. It's called the consent to transition to transaction broker form. It has the natural rhythm to it, and we use that rhythm to help us remember for exam purposes. It's called the consent to transition to transaction broker form. Yeah, man. You get that one document signed, that's enough to switch, and look what it says. The consent, you're getting the permission to transition. That means to switch to what relationship? Transaction broker. That's all it means. You get that one document signed, that's enough to switch. All right, now go to the next page. Next page. This is page 76, right? You see figure 4.2. Authorized relationships in one brokerage firm in the same transaction. Let me test you on this. And you can take a note of this. I'm going to abbreviate the different types of relationships. You tell me if these relationships can be combined within the same transaction, same brokerage company. Are they acceptable to be combined in the same transaction, same brokerage company? You tell me. What if you have a transaction broker, TB, transaction broker relationship with both sides? Is that okay? Neutral with buyer, neutral with the seller? Yes. The answer is yes. Okay. What about a transaction broker relationship with one side and a no side? NB, no brokerage. So you're neutral with one side and you're not representing the other side. You're just taking care of the paperwork. Is that acceptable? The answer is yes. What about a no brokerage relationship for both sides? You're just taking care of the paperwork for both sides. Is that acceptable? Yes, that combination can work. What about a transaction broker relationship with one side and a single agent relationship with the other side? So you're loyal and obedient, single agent with one side and neutral with the other. Is that acceptable? No, it's unacceptable. What about a single agent relationship with both sides?
Double dipping.
Single agent relationship with both sides. Can you be loyal? No, and
No.
first of all, it's no, and it's an illegal what? Dual
agency.
agency, being a dual agent. What if, last combination, what if you have a single agent relationship with one side and a no brokerage relationship with the other side? You're
Yes.
loyal, obedient to one side, fiduciary with one side, and just taking care of the paperwork with the other side, not representing them. The answer is yes. And this is the only acceptable combination that can be made if you already have a single agent relationship with one side. The only other way that you can assist the other side is just to take care of the paperwork form. So I mentioned it would probably be most appropriate to choose a single agent relationship if you're representing a relative or your best friend. We talked about the most common circumstance of choosing the no brokerage relationship is when you're dealing with a FSBO, because they don't want you to represent them. They don't want you to negotiate. They want to do it on their own. They just want you to take care of the paperwork. But there is a situation where if you already have single with one side, you can't represent the other side. So how can you help them? You had this question just a moment ago. Well, you can take care of the paperwork for the other side, and that's it. But you got to let them know, hey, listen, I'm not representing you. I'm representing this side. I'm just taking care of the paperwork. So if you ask me my professional opinion, know that I'm looking out for them. You're on your own when it comes to that. Any questions about this?
Yeah,
Yes.
question just from an example. Like what
Let me
about
take it. Hold on a second so I could hear
Yeah.
you a little bit better. I got my sound on the TV, but I can't adjust that output. No speakers. Okay, now I can hear. Go ahead.
How about now? Okay. So what about in the example of like a repeat buyer investor? Like what is the common relationship that you have with?
I'd still use a transaction broker relationship.
You'd still, okay.
I mean, unless they're now your friend and you feel like you want to look out
Some of them do. Yeah.
I would say in most circumstances, you're going to choose the transaction broker relationship. And
Okay.
that kind of
Okay.
But lean on your broker and ask them, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Go to page 77. And we can highlight this. It's relevant. Not that you have to write down the question number. I'm still working on it. But we see Brokerage Relationship Disclosure Act, residential transactions. The Brokerage Relationship Disclosure Act, BRIDA, mandates that the duties and obligations that have been detailed in the units that we described previously apply to all real estate transactions, residential and non-residential. However, written disclosures are required only for what? Yes, written disclosures are only required for residential sale transactions. So what's a residential sale? You know what residential is. We identified it and wrote it down yesterday. It's we're talking about the sale, okay? The sale of how many units? 4 units or less. We'll see that here. And the sale of 10 or fewer what? Acres. It just confirms what we wrote down yesterday, but we see it again. And this gives you examples of 4 units or less. Any questions about that? Single family, townhouse, condo, triplex, duplex, quadruplex. We talked about it yesterday. And what is not a residential sale? You'll see this for your homework. A lease, that's not a residential sale. You see right here. Business, that's not residential. I think we get it. And if it's not residential, it says are not required does not apply. The same rule does not apply, the disclosure requirements. Let's continue on. Go to page 78. It says disclosure format. This section has probably changed for you. Disclosure format. Now, if you're working with a buyer, because of this National Association of Realtors settlement, and I can share the information with you if I can get your attention real quick. So essentially, you know the National Association of Realtors. To become a realtor, you have to join that membership. If you are a realtor, there is a rule that requires that if you're working with a buyer, you have to have a signed agreement with them that stipulates representation and how much compensation they're willing to give you when you help find the property for them. Before, it wasn't the case. We would rely on the seller to pay commissions not only to their agent, the listing agent putting it on the market, but also us working with our buyer. But that has changed. So this is the new rule. Anyhow, what I can tell you is this. What's the only relationship out of the 3 which is automatically assumed in the state of Florida? Yeah. So if it's automatically assumed, then it doesn't necessarily require written disclosure to stipulate you're a transaction broker. If it's the no brokerage relationship, single agent relationship, the other 2, since those are not assumed in the state of Florida, you have to have written disclosure that says I'm a single agent or I'm helping you as a no brokerage, having the no brokerage relationship. Does that make sense?
Oh, one question though.
Yes.
Am I catching this right? So if you are part of the Realtor Association, does that mean you have to disclose transactional broker, or do they not care about that?
It's not about the relationship per se. It's about, the relationship could dictate if you're representing or not. But specifically geared towards the buyer, this is how the rules have changed. You have to before it was like, I'll take you to go see a couple properties without getting you to sign an agreement. It's automatically assumed I'm a transaction broker. Working with you. People are inherently loyal. And then you'll roll the dice and hope that they don't try to choose another real estate agent behind your back. Me personally, I wouldn't do that. I'd always get them to sign an agreement that says I'm representing them. If I'm working with you, I'm showing you 20 properties, I'm going to make sure you sign an agreement with me. But real estate agents were not always doing that. That was not always the case, unless it was a brokerage company policy and your broker said you got to do it. So now it's required. Even at minimum, a touring agreement, a showing agreement. If I'm going to show you a property, you have to sign that says I'm representing you for this property I'm showing you and how much compensation you'll pay me if you get this property. That's at minimum. Or you can have something a little bit more comprehensive that says, I'm going to represent you not just for this property, but for the next 6 months. Something like that. Does that help answer your question a little bit better? Or we already talked about switching relationships. You have to get that signed. Record keeping. How long must you retain records for? Look on line 33. 5 years. 5 years. Even if it's a failed transaction. You'll see right here on line 36, in the middle of line 36, if the transaction fails to close, you still have to retain the documents. Hold on to it for how many years? 5 years. Like IRS, you have to keep documents for 3 years. But for real estate, you have to keep it for 5 years. God bless you. So they can ask you to pull up a contract that you worked on 5 years ago if there's some type of lawsuit surrounding it. And that's because of the statute of limitations. Have you ever heard of the statute of limitations? That's the time limit to sue somebody. You have 5 years. So that's why in real estate, you have to retain documents for 5 years. How do we retain documents nowadays? Look, it says may be stored in a what type of format? Yeah, it just has to be readily accessible. It says by the broker. So not just in a private hard drive that you don't make accessible to the broker. Usually a lot of documents are stored in the cloud, so it can be revealed at a moment's notice. Go to page 79. I don't know if they include this anymore. You could tell me if they include examples of what these disclosures look like the no brokerage and the single agency. And then on page 80, consent to transition, what that looks like. It's just as reference. It's good to see it. They're very straightforward. They're very simple. It's not complicated. It's not multiple pages. It's a small paragraph. Yeah, that's a question. Yeah. This is a wonderful thing to be a real estate agent these days versus when I got my license and became a broker. When I became a broker, I had to retain a filing cabinet with physical contracts that were up to date, and they change documents all the time. Every year, things change, and I have to update all of the contracts in my filing cabinet to make it available to my agents so they can copy it and then bring it physically to somebody to sign it by hand. Now everything's digital. And as a realtor, there's a tool that's called Form Simplicity. And it's a database of every single contract that's up to date that you might need for your transaction. So every disclosure you see in the textbook, the listing agreements, the buyer representation agreements, the contracts used to switch, lease agreements, all of that. It's in the database. And you fill it out digitally and you send it to them to their flipping phone so they can sign it with their finger. That's the way we do business nowadays. I had to chase people down for signatures. That's how, meet me at the McDonald's that, whatever, we got to get it signed by this date or we're going to lose it was that. So these days, you have it easy. You say, hey, listen, did you receive the email with the e-signature request? Okay, you just sign with your finger. Come on. Like GPS tracking on my... Yeah, I had GPS. Oh, when I started, yeah, GPS exists. I mean, before that was MapQuest, but if you remember MapQuest still exists. Yeah. I mean, it's just somebody throwing a party. You're like, okay, what's the address? I'll throw it in MapQuest and then get the directions and print it out and like be driving and be like, okay, we turn on, Coral Street right over there. It's like, you got to pay attention. I got a Tesla for a reason. I hate, I don't want to say hate driving because something bad is going to happen that prevents me from driving. God, I appreciate the ability to drive. But I don't enjoy it. Let's just say that. So autopilot helps me out. I'll put it on every chance I get. Anyhow, let's move on. Exceptions and disclosure requirements. When does it not make sense upon first interaction with somebody to whip out a contract on them? That's essentially what this is describing. Because what the book will tell you, and it's very subtle, and I can just mention this to you, when do you present the agreement that you're going to work with them? What's the appropriate time? Yeah, I'm going to say all your answers are relevant because it's when the situation dictates for you to whip out a contract on somebody. Does that make sense? Before you do any work, Let's make it simple. Before you start listing their property, you have to have an agreement signed in place, signed listing contract. And before you take them on a tour of properties, you got to have an agreement in place with that buyer. So it just makes sense. However, the book doesn't describe that well, but they give you the exceptions when it's not appropriate to whip out a contract on somebody. And let's just describe the most important ones, which are these first four here. If they're already working with another agent, that's number one. I'm just giving you the basic. If they're already working with somebody else, that's not your client, okay? Stay away. Don't step on people's toes. In an open house or in a model home, whipping out a contract on somebody when they want to see the master bedroom. That's not appropriate. Casual encounters. You're at Publix next door. You say, hey, listen, oh, you're thinking about selling your house? I'm sorry I was eavesdropping, but I just got my real estate license. I can help you out. Can you sign this contract with me? You're going to scare the crap out of people. And if they're asking general factual questions, guys, well, is the the primary bedroom on the first floor?
Sign this agreement first.
Yeah. Before I share that information with you, I have this little agreement that you have to sign that says I'm going to represent you for the next 6 months. It didn't make sense. Present factual information. We're almost done with this unit. If you go to the bottom of page 81, every time you learn a rule or a law, you're probably going to learn the exception to that. Do you remember I mentioned this yesterday? I said every time you learn a law, you're probably going to learn the exception. Most of the laws were created for what type of property? Residential property that people are living in, right? Makes sense. You want to protect those individuals. So if we're not talking about residential, do the same rules apply? I mentioned I would show you. It comes up time and time again. Here it is. And a what type of transaction? Non-residential transaction. Okay. Before I describe what this is, do you remember earlier we talked about being a dual agent? Dual agent? You're a double agent. You're trying to represent both sides fiduciarily. That's illegal. But there's an exception. If we're not talking about what type of property? Residential. It says in a non-residential transaction where the buyer and the seller have assets, each have assets of how much? $1 million. One broker can designate two sales associates, says the broker may designate two sales associates within their brokerage office to act as single agents for both sides in the same transaction. We just learned that that's illegal. If they're working for the same brokerage, they're under the same umbrella, you have alliance with both sides, that's an illegal dual agency. But that's for residential. This is non-residential. And that's confirmed for us on the next page, line 1. Look in parentheses. In a residential transaction, this would be considered an illegal what? Dual agency. Do you follow? Yes. On page 82, check this out, line 1 in parentheses. In a residential transaction, what I just mentioned to you, it's illegal. But this is non-residential. That's why it's acceptable. Like a commercial deal. Selling commercial, like this office building, for instance. Let's continue on. Go to page 83. This is our last subject. Last subject of this unit. Up until now, we've been talking about the various types of relationships, how to get into the relationship, the duties within. Now let's talk about terminating. If you hear the word terminating, you probably think of something negative. It's human nature. But termination in real estate is not necessarily something negative. Termination in real estate means to end. So write this down. What are you doing? If you're terminating, you're what? Ending the relationship. How can you end the relationship? Well, in various ways, which we're going to see on this list. State exam, I ask you, what's the best way to end? It's your first bullet point. Fulfillment means everybody got what they wanted. Buyer said they would buy, they bought it. Seller said they would sell, they sold it. We got paid our commission. We all walk away happy. Isn't that the best way to end things? Everybody walks away happy. But that's one way. The next is mutual agreement. It's not working out for either party. They want to go their separate way. It's not you. It's me. Don't use that cliche line, but I think you get it. Expiration of the terms. You have a time period for representation. It expires. It's ended. Broker walks away. They might be losing any commissions that they could have possibly gained by staying in the transaction, but it's possible for them to walk away. Principal walks away. They might owe money to the brokerage if they try to terminate early. That's stipulated in the agreement, early termination fee. Or what if the broker spent money for what specifically? Look, I just highlighted. Yeah, they spent money on advertising. Well, maybe it stipulates in the agreement, you terminate early. I spent money to promote your property. You got to reimburse me. And then you can get out. It's all stipulated. The next two are death. If anybody dies, can you force somebody to complete a contract from beyond the grave? No. Destruction of the property. That's going to terminate. It's wiped out by a hurricane. Like you have a listing agreement to list that and sell that property. It's wiped out by a hurricane. It terminates the agreement. And the big B, which is what? Either party goes through bankruptcy, it terminates. Think about this. If you're working with a buyer, they file bankruptcy. They don't have any money. They're bankrupt. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. If you're working with a seller, files bankruptcy, it terminates because they shouldn't have anything to sell. They forfeit their assets. Or at least most of their assets, except for their primary residence. But there's stipulations for bankruptcy court based on that, yes. If they don't have any money, good luck trying to go after them for whatever money is owed. That's a good question. If you want to take legal action, go ahead. They're going to be like, really? You want to do this? Whoever your legal counsel is. So like, they just filed for bankruptcy, you know? Anyhow. Usually bankruptcy wipes out debt anyway. So let's take a break. We're done with this unit. How do you guys feel for unit 4? Did you guys understand? Okay, here's the thing. Understanding those 3 relationships is what you need to know for unit 4. Unit 4 is one of the important units for exam purposes. So if you understand those 3, you're good. But we're not done, obviously. When we take a break and come back, be back at 11, we'll continue with unit 3. Sound good? Stretch out, grab a snack, do what you got to do. Be ready to rock and roll. See you at 11. work? What's the hours? Remotely, or you go to office? Okay. What's your background? What do you do? Oh, okay. What position? Like what? Okay. Very nice. Mhm. Okay. Are you still in human resources right now? Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so you're kind of sales, yeah. It's a good transition. You can take the no until you get to the yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're gonna like this. This is gonna be a good transition for you. I'm confident. You're in the right place. We got to get started. The stragglers back here, but all right. So Unit 3, we can see the title: Real Estate License Law, Commission Rules. We're talking about the Florida Real Estate Commission, not the money. And we're going to begin with page 45. At the bottom, what agency do we see? We see DeBeeper. We know who DeBeeper is. Department of Business Professional Regulation. Of course, that's the official name, but we wrote down yesterday that they're the Florida Licensing Authority. Who issues a license? DeBeeper. And you'll see right here. That's going to be confirmed for us. End of line 16. They're the agency charged with licensing, regulating businesses and professionals that they issue licenses for in the state of Florida. Not just real estate, kickboxing, athletic agent licenses, geologists, contractors, cosmetology, barbers. I can go on. We're going to see several facts about DeBeeper, the Florida Licensing Authority, on page 46. I want you to highlight, starting on line 3, these bullet points. This tells you when DeBeeper can step in and regulate, impose their authority upon the public. If the unregulated practice can harm the public, they can step in. If the public is not adequately protected, or if there's no other restriction, means of authority available, then they can step in and use their authority. Another fun fact on line 9, DeBeeper operates under what branch of the governor? Executive, something you could be tested on. But look on line 11, something we talked about yesterday. Under Chapter 455 of the Florida statutes, which is the law that governs DeBeeper, the Florida Licensing Authority, it also gives them authority to do what? Investigate consumer complaints, issue court orders when conducting investigations, and issue cease and desist orders to unlicensed individuals. People that are acting as if they have a license, but they don't. Shut them down. On line 15, this is just some general information. The chief administrator of the DeBeeper is also the what of the DeBeeper? Yes, but who are they appointed by? And confirmed by the what? State Senate. And where's their main office located? Unfortunately, the capital of Florida, Tallahassee. Not that it's unfortunate that they're located in the capital. It's unfortunate that Tallahassee is our capital, because it should be Orlando. Okay. It's like Albany, all right?
Oh, don't even get me started.
I mean, it's like,
Don't even.
you understand, right? Just weird. But let's move on. You don't have to know everything on this organizational chart, but it's a good reference to understand how each department is structured. I'll tell you the most important parts, including on page 47, this division that exists within the beeper called the Division of Professions. What purpose do they serve? You might be tested on this right here. It's on lines 4 and 5. They regulate educational courses, license examinations. So this division has the contract with Pearson VUE to administer testing because they don't want to do it themselves. They say, let's just use this tech company that has the software. The Division of Service Operations, what purpose do they serve? You'll see it right here. It's on line 17. Central intake that processes all license what? Applications and fees. But I can tell you that if you're applying for a real estate license, who does the actual processing? It's the DRE. Who's DRE? It's our division, Division of Real Estate, because we're trying to get a real estate license, correct? And it says they provide all services required to administer Florida real estate license law, also known as chapter what? What's Florida real estate license law? Chapter 475 of the Florida statutes. You got it. Question? They handle routine duties, clerical functions, ministerial duties is how they describe it. They're pencil pushers, okay? They process paperwork. That's the Division of Real Estate. That's the main purpose that they serve. And where is their main office located? You'll see it on line 34. Yes, Orlando, Florida. I mentioned this to you yesterday, if you can recall. The Florida Real Estate Commission, they have meetings once a month. Do you remember that? You can attend the meeting and you can get how many hours credit towards your continuing education? 3 hours per renewal cycle out of the 14 total you have to do every 2 years. The meetings are held in the headquarters for the Division of Real Estate, which is downtown Orlando, 400 West Robinson Street. Let's move on to the next page. We see the Florida Real Estate Commission. Now let's learn some information about FREC on top of what we already learned. What's their purpose? Look on line 3. To protect the general what? By regulating who? Real estate licensees. All real estate licensees in the state. They're even, look on line 5. FREC is also charged with fostering the what? So you can thank FREC for the fact that you only have to take a 63-hour class to get the license in Florida. Awesome, right? Let's move on. How are they composed? Because I mentioned that I applied to be appointed by Ron DeSantis as one of the commissioners. So what does it consist of? You're probably thinking it's a huge organization. If they're responsible for regulation of tens of thousands of licensees in the entire state of Florida, the thing is probably a big department. It's to the contrary. How many total members are there? Look, I'm highlighting. On line 12, 7 members. This is how they're composed. Look at figure 3.2, under line 20. 4 of them are active what? Who have been licensed for at least 5 years. 1 of them can be an active sales associate or broker who have been licensed for at least 2 years. And 2 of them are what type of members? People who have never had a real estate what? Yeah. And of course, that's a good opinion to have. The average consumer is an outside opinion on rules, regulations, laws that they impose. And at least one has to be held a little seniority, right? 60 or older. Makes sense. Somebody who's been around, who's seen changes in the market, rules, regulations is a good opinion to have. What's their term? First of all, who has to select you? Yes, and has to be confirmed by the Florida what? Yes, and how long of a term can you serve? It says 4-year staggered terms. So what that means is, if I can get your attention real quick, 4 years on, 4 years off, 4 years on, 4 years off, as many times as you wish. But how many consecutive back-to-back 4-year terms, just like the president, just like the governor? How many consecutive back-to-back 4-year terms? It's right here on line 1 of the next page. May not serve more than 2 consecutive 4-year terms. And it makes sense because every new governor gets to choose their 7 commissioners. And how long is the governor's term? 4 years. How many consecutive 4-year terms? 2. Let's move on. So you're probably wondering why Michael is thinking about becoming a commissioner. He probably will get paid a lot for doing it, but it's a thankless job. Look on line 5. Commission members do not receive a what? In lieu of a salary, you only get how much? $50 per day. Per diem is per day. Yeah, so $50 per day when on official business, but how often do you meet to be on official business? How often are meetings? Once a month. So $50 a month. Plus, don't worry, it's not suffering, okay? Commission members also receive reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses such as travel, accommodations, meals. But I live in Winter Park. So I'm, 15 minutes from downtown Orlando. How much expenses could I actually rack up for travel and the mileage of my car and all this stuff? Like if somebody was a commissioner and they were like from Miami, they got to come up to the meeting once a month in Orlando. And it doesn't include Disney tickets, but meals. And they're not going to pay me for accommodations either because I'm just going to go home. But anyhow, it's interesting. But I want to have an impact, a positive impact on the profession. And I know a direction that we should take it. Let's continue on. FREC meetings are held each month in the headquarters for the Division of Real Estate, which we know is located where? Downtown Orlando. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about for FREC is right here. It's on the bottom of page 49, Commission, General Powers and Duties. Let me read this out to you in line 18. The FREC makes decisions and sets policies that are carried out by the Division of Real Estate. The powers and duties of FREC fall into 3 areas of responsibility. Let's go through each one. The first is called what? Executive power or authority, which, if I can simplify it for you, means they have control over your what? Your license. So what does that mean? We'll look at the bullet points. They foster the education of applicants and licensees. So that means if you want to get a license, you have to conform to the educational requirements. And if you don't, they can deny you licensure. They control your license because of that. If you don't complete the renewal education with us and pay your renewal fees, then they can refuse to renew your license. They have control of your license for that reason, or take away your license. Adopt a seal doesn't mean they adopt a baby seal from SeaWorld. Okay? Adopt a seal means if they have to make a final decision, a final order against the licensee for maybe a complaint filed against them or a violation of law, they use a stamp, a seal that represents all of their signatures. They adopt their signatures through the use of a seal. It's a weird thing that you have to know, but regardless, that's what it is. And they establish fees. If you don't pay the fees, then your license will be affected, and they control that. Let's move on. Quasi or quasi what? Legislative. What does quasi mean? Not Quasimodo, okay? But quasi means what? Yes, exactly. Kind of, sort of, almost. And we can actually write that down to help us better understand what this is all about for exam purposes. It's kind of. Legislative means to make laws. So they can kind of make what? Laws. It'll just help you remember. Quasi-legislative, they can kind of make laws. But the laws that they establish are not criminal. If you look up here, it's Florida Real Estate License Law, also referred to as administrative law, is what they enact. So they only have control of your license. Remember, executive authority. These laws only affect individuals who are licensed within that profession. Does that make sense? Does not extend to criminal. And we'll talk more about that. And you'll see details. They create and pass rules and regulations. The commission promulgates, adopts rules that provide details as to how the statutes are to be administered. And they regulate professional practices based on those laws that they create, Chapter 475 of the Florida statutes. But what happens if you violate the laws? Quasi-judicial is what happens. What does quasi mean? Kind of, sort of, almost. And judicial means they can judge you. Put it together. They can kind of judge you. Because we know that they're limited to handling matters that have to do with your real estate, what? License. They're only limited to administrative matters, license matters. They can't judge you past your license and impose some type of criminal penalty against you. That's what I'm telling you.
But they can do whatever they want with your license.
As far as the license is concerned, and you'll see evidence of that. Look,
So then if it is a criminal matter, then does it just go to the?
they could recommend, they just can't enforce themselves. The most severe penalty that FRET can impose is to do what with your license? Yeah. That's the most severe extent of their authority. Now, could it result in legal action beyond that? Yeah, but that's not what, they can't be involved in that.
They have to push that to the courts.
Exactly. Whoever's filing a lawsuit against you, that's handled in criminal court. Could they recommend to a criminal judge that you serve a jail sentence based on what you did? Yeah, but they can't enforce it themselves, is what I'm saying, because they only, most severe penalty is to do what with your license? Revocation.
They can provide expertise in a way.
Mm-hmm. And they can make determinations of violations under those statutes. Let's continue on. I want to switch gears, talk about something a little bit different on page 51. We're switching gears. We're not talking about FREC anymore. We're talking about license on line 2. Renewal what? Yeah, no matter who you are, if you have a real estate license in the state of Florida, your license can only expire on one of 2 dates. Those are the only 2 expiration dates that you'll see on a real estate license. My goal is to show you which date you fall on based on when you pass the state exam. It could only be these 2. And you might be tested on it. Before I show you the shortcut, because there's a really simple way to figure it out, here is the rule. Your initial license, what's your initial license? Your initial license.
Is that the
When you pass your state exam and you get your license for the first time, that's your initial license. That initial license is good, I'm simplifying what it says, is good for at least how many months? And cannot go over how many months? 24 months. I'm going to share this with you. So that's the rule. Now let me show you the shortcut. It's really quite simple. Let's see if I have some space. Yeah, I have some space right here in this margin. What are the 2 dates? Let's refresh our minds. Either what? March
31st.
or September 30th. Write those down separately or in the margin or somewhere. Write it again so you could see it. I'm going to give you several examples of when somebody passes their state exam, and then I'll show you the shortcut on how to figure out which one of those 2 dates their first expiration date falls on. That's the goal. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, Michael, isn't the expiration date on the license? Yes, it is. But in order to get the license, they might test you on this. You understand? Is my light on? All right, cool. So let me give you an example. I'll give you several. Let's say you pass your state exam on my son's birthday, August 13th. And let's say the year 2024. When would that license expire? Here's the shortcut. But I need your attention so you understand how it works. You only have 2 options, right? Those are the only 2 options that you can select from. Either March 31st or September what? 31st. But here's a shortcut. Out of those 2 options, what's the closest out of these 2 that we can get to August 13th without going past August 13th? The closest we can get to August 13th out of these 2 options is obviously March, because September is past, right? That's the answer. March 31st, but of what year? 2026. 18 to 24 months. And you can always verify with that fact. Your initial license is good for at least 18, cannot go over 24. So if you add up the time between these two dates, is that between 18 to 24 months? Yeah, it is. You can always check your work, but I'll show you the shortcut again. Here's another example. I'll answer a question in a second. Let's say you pass your state exam on my birthday. I'm still accepting gifts. November 15th, let's say the year 2024 again. When would that license expire? Out of these two options, up top, March 31st or September 30th, what's the closest out of those two that we can get to November 15th without going past? September is before, right? And that's the closest we can get. It is September. The year 2026. Give you another example. Let's say you pass your state exam on September 29th, 2024. When would that license expire? Why can't we choose September 30th of 2026? You go over 24 months by 1 day, and your license, if you're late by 1 day, becomes null and void, and you have to start all over again. So you understand why knowing this is so important. So you have to use March 31st, and of what year? 2026. And last example, let's say you pass your state exam on my other son's birthday, March 6th, in the year 2025. When would that license expire? What's the closest we can get to March 6th out of those two options? September, yes. What year, though? What year? It'll be 2026. If you choose 2027, it goes over 2 years. Add it up, you'll find out that it does. This keeps you within the 18 to 24 month range. So you can always check your work with that, but that's the correct answer. Once again, your expiration date is going to be on the face of the license, but in order to get your license, they might test you on this. What will be the next expiration date? I'll test you on something. Look up here real quick. I'll do this. Between the time you pass your state exam, this might actually be realistic, and your first expiration date, what course needs to be completed with us? We call it a post-license course. Okay, let me test you on this. What would be the next expiration date? No,
Oh, after you do
this is your first expiration date. What's going to be your next one?
September 30,
Now it's
28.
every 2 years on the same date. So what's exactly 2 years later? September 30th of 2028. What's going to be the next expiration date? September 30th of 2030. You get it? Every 2 years if you want to keep your license. And what class has to be completed? CE, which is your continuing education every 2 years, within every 2 years. If you want to keep your license. Any questions? You still have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just confused by how March 6, 25 is like a year to September.
If you add it up between March 6, 2025 and September 30th, 2026, is it at least 18 months? Yes. Does it go over 24 months? No. So it fits within that window. Some people think this. They think, okay, I passed my state exam. My license is good for 2 years. Not the case. Your first renewal, you might have to do up to 6 months earlier than you initially thought, because your initial license is good for at least 18 months. It's not exactly 2 years. That's why I mentioned you pass the state exam, come right back and do your post. Don't put yourself in that position. Wow, I thought I had more time. I thought it was good for 2 years. Okay, well, you learned in class that you had to do early. Let's continue on. License renewal, line 25. Okay, this is what I want to mention to you. If I can get your attention real quick before you highlight anything. You're going to complete your education with us. Your hours get reported to the state. It stays on file with them. You could do your education as early as you like. And I recommend it. Get it out of the way so you have peace of mind. But you can't completely renew your license until you pay the renewal fee. And that doesn't go to us. It goes to DeBeeper. Same place where you apply for a license, manage your license. You just log into your account and use your credit card. Okay? They do not accept your fee early. You can only pay your renewal fee. I want you to write this down. When you get within 90 days of license expiration date. That's when you can pay your renewal fee. We're within that window right now because we know an expiration date is March 31st, right? For a lot of people in Florida. So starting January 1st, that's within 90 days of March, the end of March. So licensees are getting letters right now. They're saying, hey, listen, if you haven't completed your education with your school, go ahead and do it right now. And now you can send us your renewal fee. So they do send notification, but don't rely on that. Just know that you have to do it. This is the rule. Let's continue on. I just simplify this. It says they'll send it to the address of record, but once again, don't rely on that. Let's continue on. It's right here. It says 90 days, but they describe it in a weird way. So I gave you the simplification of that. Let's continue on to line 39. Check this out. If licensees renew after the expiration date, a what fee is charged? But you're probably thinking, well, wait a second, Michael, you said if you're late by 1 day for the first renewal, don't you lose your license? Yes. So they're not talking about the first renewal. For the first renewal, you're late by 1 day, you lose your license, it becomes null and void, you have to requalify. This is not talking about the first renewal. It says it's other than the first renewal. If you've already completed your post, every renewal after that is your what? Every 2 years after that is your CE. What does CE stand for? Continuing education. It's only 14 hours, piece of cake. But if you don't renew by the expiration date for your CE, what happens to your license? Your license reverts, look on line 40, at the end of line 40, automatically to what status? In not just inactive, but what it says, involuntary inactive. So we'll talk about that. Involuntary inactive. We talked about voluntary inactive, right? Involuntary inactive is when you pass a state exam, you're not practicing yet. You're basically sitting on your license until you can find an employer, make your license active, start making commissions and sales. Involuntary inactive is when you're late to renew your license. We're talking about other than the first renewal. Let's continue on. There's only one group that receives an exception to the rule, and it's armed forces. If you're serving our country, we don't expect you to renew your license while you're serving in the military. But once you're discharged, you have within how much time to take care of it? Within 2 years of discharge. That's plenty of time.
Yeah, I was generous. I didn't think, I was thinking like maybe like
6 months or whatever the case may be. No, it's 2 years. It's a lot of time. What's the only, I'm just reviewing with you guys. What's the only acceptable status to provide real estate services and make money in our business? Active. And that's here. Finding an employer, registering with the beeper. This is redundant. We already discussed that. It's just the book does a lot of repeating because they want things to really be drilled in your brain. We talked about voluntary inactive, right? Pass your state exam, you're not practicing. You still have to renew your license, even if you're not practicing. But then we have involuntary inactive. And we just mentioned this. It says, if a licensee fails to what? Renew, then the status will result. And look in parentheses on line 35. It says, other than the what? First renewal. So we're talking about being late to complete your CE. That's what your status will be. So with that being said, if I can ask you a question, if your license is involuntary inactive because you did not complete your CE in time, can you practice real estate, make commissions? No, because the only acceptable status is active, and you're currently inactive, involuntary inactive, unacceptable. So let's talk about this. When a licensee has been involuntary inactive for 12 months or what? Less. 12 months or less. 1 year or less past your expiration date to complete your CE. That's what it means. Obviously, you can't practice real estate. Your license is involuntary inactive. But what do you have to do to get back on track? That's the question. It says complete your education, 14 hours, pay your renewal fee, and they also charge you a what fee? A late fee is charged, if you remember that. What if you're late by more than what? 12 months, but less than 24 months, less than 2 years. I want you to write this down. This is going to simplify it for you. Basically, they double everything. Okay? So instead of 14 hours, what's double? It's called a 28-hour reactivation course. You don't want to do it. They double your fees and they double your late fines. But you can still renew your license and not lose it yet. However, what if you're over 2 years late to complete your CE, over 2 years involuntary inactive? Now your license becomes null and void, and you have to start all over again. Didn't they give you plenty of time if you think about it? You had within 2 years to get it done on time, your 14-hour CE, and then they give you an additional 2 years being late until you lose your license. That's a lot of time. But let's continue. Go to the next page. There's only one exception for reinstating a null and void license, and we already talked about this. It's actually on line 8. If you've suffered a physical or what type of hardship? Economic. That's line 8. Continue down to line 14. We're talking about license statuses, classifications. Null and void. When could your license be placed on null and void status? Basically, the license no longer what? Exists. Well, we talked about several. If you're over 2 years involuntary inactive for more than 2 years, your license is gone. If your license is revoked, and this is based on disciplinary action, it's the most severe penalty FRET can impose. So since it's the most severe penalty, it's a permanent penalty. That means you can never get a license again in the state of Florida. Okay, Michael, can you get a license in another state? Yeah, potentially, but it's going to show up. It's going to be an issue on your application. They're going to ask you about it. What if you're late by 1 day for your post license? Failure to complete your post license. Null and void. And the last is you voluntarily give up your license. Like somebody who is retiring from real estate, they no longer want to practice, they could hand their license back to the state. Most people, they don't do this. They just wait for the license to what? Expire. Okay. Let's talk about another status. It's on line 29. It ceased to be in what? But I want you to write this down. Cease to be in force is not involuntary inactive. Let me repeat this again. Involuntary inactive is when you fail to renew. Cease to be in force is when you fail to notify either the beeper or FREC. So that's the difference. Involuntary and active, I'm repeating it, is when you fail to renew on time. Cease to be in force is when you fail to notify in time. You know that when certain circumstances change in your life, you might have to notify these changes, notify of these changes to the beeper, whoever you have your license with. This is not just for real estate in our profession, it's for other professions. If you change your address, look at the details. The beeper must be notified within 10 days of the following actions. Change of address. You see this? Change of employer. I want to talk about more and what's on this list. But go to the next page. You must keep your mailing address what with the state? Current. So what does it say? Look on line 32. Licensees are responsible for notifying the beeper in writing of their current address, email, place of residence, practice. Is a PO box considered to be an acceptable address? If you want to receive mail other places, another place than where you live, yeah, you can do that. When you apply for your license, you're actually going to provide two addresses. You're going to provide your physical address where you live, and then the address where you want to receive mail. Maybe for your license, you want to receive mail at a PO box. You can do it. So it's acceptable. But if you change that address, you have to notify the beeper in writing within how many calendar days? Yes. Email address as well. They have to have some way of getting in touch with you. What about for disciplinary action? What about for transaction you were involved in? License matters, everything. You can imagine that has to do with your license. So that's what we have in front of us. 10 calendar days. This is easy for you to remember. How do I know that? Because it's the same thing as your driver's what? License. If you change your address, you have to inform the DMV and get a new license issued, and that's within 10 days. Did you know that? It's the same time period. If you get pulled over by an officer, they're going to ask you for license and registration. And one of the questions they'll ask you when they look at your license, is this your current address? You've heard that question before, I'm sure of it. If you say, oh, it's not my current address, I just moved, especially if you have a license from a different state and you're in Florida, that's when they get you. They say, how long ago did you change your address? They're fishing, right? What does that mean? Well, if you say anything longer than 10 days, they're going to write you a ticket for that. It's almost a $200 ticket. So you have to keep it up to date. Let's move on. So what if you don't notify of change of address within the 10 calendar days? What will be the status of your license? It's what we're talking about here. Cease to be in force. Can you practice while your license ceases to be in force? No. What's the only acceptable status? Active. You got it. Go to page 55. What if you move out of state? That's what we see in the shaded box. You move out of state, you have to notify. It says you have to notify the commission within how many days? Yep. Otherwise, how much of a fine could they impose against you? $600. Used to be $300. To further that, you're probably going to change your address too if you move out of state. Do you have to notify of change of mailing address? Yes. Within how many days? 10 calendar days. And if you don't, if you go back to the previous page in this paragraph, what does it say? The beeper may issue how much of a citation? Whew. Used to be 500. They doubled it. Any questions here? All right, now let's move on to, all of this can be done online, all the updates, very simple. Go to the bottom of page 56 and you see change of employer. Something very interesting that you should know about. It happens all the time. Salespeople, they leave one brokerage to work for another because they think there's a better opportunity there. That happens all the time in the business. But there's something about the relationship that you have to be aware of. What type of relationship exists between a broker and their associates. Fiduciary, which means alliance. And any contract that stipulates you have a relationship with the buyer and or seller, who does that relationship really exist with? You, the sales associate, or the broker? Broker. So if you leave one broker to work for another, can you take your deals with you? Can you take your listings with you? No. That's what we see here. Look, you cannot take your listings with you. And fiduciary exists beyond employment. It does not end upon termination of employment. It extends beyond that. I'm not telling you that you're going to continuously bring business to your previous employer. That's not what I'm saying. I'm telling you that you're not going to slander their name. You're not going to badmouth them. You're not going to spread negative rumors. You're not going to steal trade secrets. You're going to keep information confidential. That's what it means. That's what fiduciary means beyond termination of employment with your previous employer. And that's what we're talking about here. Fiduciary duties. And it continues on to the next page. It says you can't divert buyers and sellers away from the previous employer. Remember, any business you bring to that brokerage company is the brokerage company's business. You can't take it with you. Unless you have expressed written consent in writing that you can take your business with you. I mean, I don't know what broker is going to agree to that, but that's the only circumstance where it might otherwise exist something different. We see here, it says obligations of associates do not end with termination of employment. I'm just confirming what we already mentioned. It says prohibited from disclosing confidential information, not stealing trade secrets. Any questions about this? All right, let's continue on. At the bottom of page 57, we see multiple and group licenses. I'm going to go through each one. This is the last subject of this unit. Yes, our last subject. Multiple licenses can be acquired by a broker, not you and an associate. Multiple licenses exist for brokers. How so? It says issued to a broker who qualifies as a broker for more than one business entity. As a broker, I can have a property management business, I can have a brokerage business, I can have a commercial, specifically commercial division, and I can have separate business entities for each one, LLCs, corporations set up for each one. And I'm the qualifying broker for those entities. I have to register those entities with the beeper, and the beeper has to issue me a license for each one of them for me to operate under those entities. So therefore, as a broker, I can have multiple licenses. I can have multiple offices. Each office that I have has to have its own unique license. So I can, and there's no limit to the amount of offices I can have as a broker. I can have hundreds in the state of Florida. So I can have multiple licenses based on that. I can be a broker for my business, and some other brokerage company that's maybe opening up a branch in Florida says we want to establish in this state, and they can hire me as their qualifying broker. So even not for my own entity, I can be a qualifying broker for another entity. And I receive a license for that, for me to operate in such a manner.
Brokerage is considered separate entities, as if like you could have an associate from two different associates from two different brokerages,
Right.
working on the same deal.
Yeah.
And that's not considered double dipping.
They could be active under that one versus another one. Now, they're not connected in that way unless they're all under the same umbrella. But as a broker, I have the ability to open up as many as I wish. I can have agents that are active with one entity, and those agents would not be active with this separate entity, maybe the commercial division, my property management division.
So then in theory, one that you own could cover the sales part of the contract, the other one could cover.
Exactly.
Okay.
100%. And I like to keep things separate in that manner, but let's move on. So it doesn't exist for associates. Remember, brokers only have this ability. Associates do not. The only ability you have is to have the one license issued in your name that you can hang with one employer at any given time. You understand that? You can't have multiple licenses. Not until you become a broker. I didn't mention what a broker associate is yesterday. I feel like I skipped that.
You did skip it.
Okay, let me mention it to you. Because we saw sales associate, broker, and broker associate. And I mentioned I would come back to it, but I
You
didn't.
mentioned a partner just like for a brief moment.
Yeah. So what is a broker associate? A broker associate is somebody who earned the broker's license, but they're not ready to open up their own office. So like, I'm not ready for this responsibility. I don't have the capital to open up an office and build out the space and furnish it and all these things, the expenses that come along with being a business owner. I want to still be in the capacity of an associate. So it's a combination of the name. They earn the broker's license, but they're working at the level of an associate, broker associate. And you submit a form to the state that says, I want to still work as an associate, and you have to hang that license with whatever broker you choose. So you can't open up your own brokerage office at that level. You might be wondering, okay, Michael, what happens if I want to open up my own office? What can I do then? You just submit another form that says, now I want to be a broker and I want to open up my own office, and you register the office wherever you're doing business out of with the state. That's it. Pretty simple. And the expense, very little for licensing. The real life expense of being a business owner is different, but group license. Let me read this out to you. Group license is sometimes issued to associates who are registered with an owner what? We know that's an option for us to hang our license with them. An owner developer may own properties in names of various entities. Think of like Lennar Homes. Have you ever heard of Lennar Homes? Huge home builder. They don't just have one development in Central Florida. They're all over the place. Lennar Homes at Lake Nona, Lennar Homes in Winter Park, Lennar Homes in Winter Garden. And what they do is they put each one of those developments under their own entity. They're under their own LLC. Lennar Homes in Lake Nona, that's under its Lennar Homes Lake Nona LLC, for instance. Why do they do this? Well, they do it for a couple of reasons. For accounting, for tax purposes, and protection against liability. They do it because if there's a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against them because of inferior construction, people's houses are falling apart after they buy it from them, and they sue the developer, they can isolate it to that one entity. It doesn't affect all their other developments or their parent company. So that's why mainly they do it. But where does that leave you as an associate who wants to sell for all of those developments in Central Florida? They put you on the group license status. They do this for you. You don't have to worry about this. You just need to know what it is. It allows you, it's right here on line 25. It allows you to sell for all of the affiliated entities of the what? Owner developer. All the developments that they have that are under the same parent company, for instance. Any questions about this? You can highlight these lines as well. 22 through 24. It says if the entities are all connected so that ownership and control is with the same owner developer, an associate working for the owner developer may legally obtain or be issued a group license. God bless you, and allows you to sell for all of their entities. Any questions here? No questions? We're done with this unit, which means we're done with our session for today. What time is it? We're done at 12. So here's the thing. We do short working breaks. This doesn't always happen, okay? I just didn't know how wonderful and efficient I was today. But as I can stay behind and answer any questions, if you were confused about something, I can review with you guys, no issue. But if you don't need a review, we're actually done with our commitment for today. You're still going to receive the full amount of credit because we covered all the material for today. And what do we have for homework tonight? Yeah, actually, before you go, let's review those 3 relationships. How about that? You want to review those 3? Okay, because we have extra time. The no brokerage relationship. You're hired not to negotiate. You're not representing. You're limited to taking care of the what? Paperwork. Is a paperwork relationship. The contract's used to solidify the deal. When most likely would you enter into that relationship? Just taking care of the paperwork. Yeah, FSBOs. mainly. You have the transaction broker relationship, which is the most common out of the three. The reason why is because there's representation, but you're not limited to one side. You can represent both sides while remaining what? Neutral. You have limited representation, which means you're not going to mention anything to the other party that's going to hurt the other. You have to remain neutral, impartial in the transaction. And you can make what off of both sides? A commish, right? You can understand why it's the most common and most popular. And the single agent relationship, you're going to choose your side. Whatever side you select, what exists between you and that buyer or seller? Fiduciary. So you select either fiduciary with the buyer or fiduciary with the seller, not both. You have to select one side. And fiduciary means alliance. So you're looking out for their best interest and theirs alone. Representation exists, but it's loyalty, obedience, and everything that goes along with it. Even though there's three relationships, and you can select any one of those three, which one is automatically assumed in the state of Florida? Transaction broker. And why would you select anything other than that? If you already have a single agent relationship with one side, what's the only other way you can assist the other side? Have what relationship with him? The no brokerage, because there's no representation with that. You're just taking care of the what. So if you already have alliance with one side, the best you can do is take care of the paperwork for the other side, and that's it. Any questions about this? That's essentially it. How do you guys feel? Good, confident? Any questions for me? The link is active for fingerprints. Go ahead and schedule. Get it done as soon as possible. And they have locations all over the nation. You can find one that's conveniently located next to you. With that being said, we're done with our session for today. Pushing your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless. I will see you mañana. Question? Yes, talk to me.
Well, class. Dr. Philip.
Yes.
tonight.
Yes. Well, it's going to be remote. It's going to be online.
Online? Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So just tell you.
Just email us, support@cameronacademy.com and say, hey, listen, can I get the link? I'm taking the morning class
Yeah.
and I want to take the evening class on Wednesday.
Okay.
And we'll send you the Zoom information.
What's the homework, Michael?
At the end of each unit, you'll see a unit quiz. It says unit exam. So we covered units 3 and 4 today. So do the exam for units 3 and 4.
Okay, thanks.
Be ready for tomorrow. Shout out your answer so we can review.
I guess while I have you on too, for day one, I need to make that up. I know there's a link online.
Yes.
Do I just click on that link, pay the $50 fee, and then it's just a video, or like, am I with
Yes.
somebody, or do I pick a time, or how does it work?
Hi, nice to meet you. See you tomorrow. You watch videos and you take little quizzes afterwards. It's that simple.
Okay. And then one last question. I had signed up for the fingerprinting and background check.
Yes.
I had called Cameron Academy because it takes us to another third-party vendor. And
Yes, we have a partnership with them. It's live
Yeah.
now, though. It works.
it works now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, because I reached out to them. They told me to reach back out to Cameron, and then, I didn't do that yet.
Yeah.
But yep.
It is live. We were just waiting for class to start to reactivate it, but now that
Okay,
class
gotcha.
has begun.
Yep. Thanks.
Alrighty.
Mhm.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Thanks, Michael.
If you have any other questions, just let me know. We're here to help you out. Hopefully you enjoy the first day of class.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Take care.